In his book Golden Interior, the Jungian analyst Robert Johnson talks about the modern ailment that has affected many people: loneliness. He says that loneliness is an internal matter and affirms that there are three types of loneliness: loneliness from the past, loneliness for what has not yet been realized, and the deep loneliness of being close to God. The first type of loneliness, loneliness for the past, is regressive. Early in life, during adolescence or early adulthood, we want to return to where we came from. We want the comfort and security of the good old days, the way things used to be. This is the loneliness that looks back, a hunger for the Garden of Eden. But there's not much we can do about it with this kind of loneliness. The loneliness that looks back is the mother complex, the desire to return to your mother's womb. This type of loneliness is especially dangerous in men because it becomes the will to fail, the propensity to relinquish power and retreat. Loneliness from the way things used to be can ruin a marriage, destroy a job, and leave you inert in almost all aspects of life. Grief is another manifestation of longing to return to what was. When we lose something, sadness and loneliness are understandable, but they are looking back. We may not feel ready to endure its weight. But all backward-looking qualities are doomed, since it is impossible for us to go backward. The second type of loneliness is the longing for what is possible but not yet realized. A vigorous, functional living human being has a vivid intuition of what they are capable of. Their intuition jumps toward dreams and imagines what is possible. They fantasize about a perfect partner or a loving relationship that will touch them deeply. They feel alone because of what is not. They think that they see outside what will alleviate their loneliness, when our value and meaning are always outside of us. When there is someone, some place, or some condition that will cure our problem, then we are trapped in an insoluble problem. The first type of loneliness drives us back and down. The second type, so far not yet realized, drives us forward and upwards at least. This is a progressive loneliness that pushes us toward achievements. But both types of loneliness drive us. In other words, we are never in control. The third type of loneliness is the most subtle and difficult, the loneliness of being dangerously close to God. The proximity to God always registers first as an extreme pain. Being close but unable to touch what you most desire is unbearable. A medieval proverb says, "The only cure for loneliness is loneliness." In the modern world, loneliness has reached its peak, as the old ways that used to protect us have worn out. When we are in this kind of pain, we cry out to be freed from our suffering. But when our understanding deepens, we retreat somewhere. We sit still and decide not to move until the dilemma is resolved. For a while, the journey is hellish, but it is finally resolved. When we are able to move from loneliness to vision, redemption occurs, and loneliness appears as though there was never anywhere to go externally. This work to do always remained internally. The shift in consciousness that turns loneliness into solitude is genius. If you are honest and perceptive, you can tell the difference between regressive loneliness, which is the first category, and the deeper levels of loneliness that manifest in ineffable ways. At these levels, you feel and then see what you cannot yet have, and these are almost indistinguishable from each other. If you can identify exactly why you feel lonely, that will reveal a lot about yourself. An individual touched by loneliness is a renewed individual immersed in the process of individuation. Loneliness can destroy you or ignite you to undertake a Dantesque journey through hell and purgatory in search of paradise. Thomas Merton, an American monk and theologian, wrote a beautiful treatise on loneliness. He commented that certain people are forced to endure the loneliness of God. Solitude is loneliness evolved to the next level of reality. Those who are forced to endure the loneliness of God should not be forced to do anything else. If you can transform your loneliness into solitude, you are one step away from the most precious experience of all. If a man knows more than others, he becomes lonely. A Gallup meta-survey analysis suggests that nearly a quarter of adults experience loneliness frequently. That's more than 1 billion people feeling lonely, potentially even more so when you consider the survey's limitations. Another 2024 survey from the American Psychiatric Association reveals that 30% of American adults report feeling lonely at least once a week in the last year, and 10% experience it daily. But why does this happen? Why do people feel lonely? And most importantly, what can we do about it? Psychologist and psychiatrist Carl Jung, founder of analytical psychology, knew a thing or two about loneliness. In his autobiography Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung wrote, "The knowledge of the processes in the background early shaped my relationship with the world. Basically, that relationship was the same in my childhood as until the present moment. As a child, I felt alone, and I still feel alone, because I know things and must hint at things that others apparently know nothing about and mostly don't want to know. Loneliness does not come from not having people around but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself or holding certain opinions that others consider inadmissible." Loneliness began with the experiences of Jung's first dreams and reached its climax at the time when he was working on the unconscious. If a man knows more than others, he becomes a loner. But loneliness is not necessarily the enemy of company, because no one is more sensitive to company than the solitary man, and company only flourishes when each individual remembers their individuality and does not identify with others. Jung's personal perspective on loneliness is provocative. He argued that loneliness is not simply physical isolation but a deeper sense of disconnection. Everyone naturally wants meaningful connections where they can share their inner thoughts and feelings. When they feel like they are not heard, seen, or understood, they withdraw into themselves, and loneliness sets in, even if they are surrounded by people. When our sense of self, our beliefs, and our perspectives are not accepted by others, a barrier is created. We may feel pressured to hide our true selves for fear of judgment or rejection. That disconnection means we deny real connection with those who could offer it. Jung's honest observation is important because it shifts the focus from external circumstances to internal ones. Jung believed that fully expressing who we are is essential for real connection and a psychologically rich life. He said that being kind and pleasing others, although socially applauded and generally recognized as positive traits, can actually harm our health. Decades of research point to the same conclusion. Repressing our anger, prioritizing duty and the needs of others above our own, and trying not to disappoint others are major causes of chronic illness. Ignoring or suppressing how we feel and what we need, whether consciously or unconsciously, activates our stress response, pushing our body toward inflammation at the expense of our immune system. Even if our opinions, perspectives, and feelings are unconventional, Jung thought it was essential to have a safe space to express them. Suppressing them can create a sense of isolation. Jung wrote about how his loneliness began in his early childhood in his autobiography, and I quote, "This unchildish behavior was connected on the one hand with an intense sensitivity and vulnerability and, on the other, especially with the loneliness of my early youth. I played alone and in my own way. Naturally, I could not talk to anyone about these things. I didn't know anyone with whom I could have communicated them, except possibly my mother. She seemed to think somewhat similar to mine, but soon I noticed that in conversation, she was not suitable for me. Her attitude towards me was, above all, one of admiration, and that was not good for me. So I remained alone with my thoughts. In general, I liked it better that way. I played alone, daydreamed, or walked in the forest alone and had a secret world of my own." Jung struggled but recovered later in life. He remembered his individuality and chose a different path. He said, "Company prospers only when each individual remembers their individuality and does not identify with others. Ignoring your feelings and needs, even unconsciously, triggers a stress response, increases the release of stress hormones, spikes inflammation, and weakens your immune system." Among psychologists, there is broad consensus on what our fundamental needs are. These have been listed in various ways: belongingness, relationship or connection, autonomy, a sense of control in one's life, mastery or competence, genuine self-esteem, not dependent on achievements, acquisitions, or appreciation by others, confidence, a sense of having the personal and social resources necessary to sustain oneself throughout life, purpose, meaning, transcendence, or knowing oneself as part of something larger than individual and egocentric concerns, whether something overtly spiritual, universal, humanistic, or nature-oriented. The assertion that the physical and mental life of man and nature are interdependent simply means that nature is interdependent with itself, since man is part of nature. None of this tells you anything you do not know or understand intuitively. You can check your own experience, for example, how you feel when each of these needs is satisfied. What happens in your mind and body when lack is denied or withdrawn from any of these needs? Do everything you can for others, but do not lose yourself in the process. Speak your truth. These limits do more for your mental health, as your happiness and stability depend on it. But on the other hand, we must understand that loneliness is sweet. It is the pleasure of not having to put up with other people. On one hand, people can enrich our lives in many ways, but on the other, they can be significant sources of pain. Let's be honest, in many cases, it is not the job itself that makes it difficult. It is not only workplaces that are toxic, but the people in them. It is not the school itself that makes some children unhappy, but the bad teachers and bullies. Humans have the gift of making others unhappy, but at the same time, we are also good at bringing pleasure, comfort, and happiness. Consequently, human interaction is an exchange. The more we interact, the more we face the dark side of our fellow human beings. The more we distance ourselves, the less we face human toxicity and the stress of dealing with people who are nosy, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and moody. Marcus Aurelius described the difficult people he encountered daily. It is not surprising that the sage described in the book of Taoism, Swan, rejected the position of ruler of the kingdom and chose a solitary life in a cabin by the river, where he could fish and be at peace. Being alone is a pleasure, and when the joy of solitude captivates us, it can become addictive. The absence of critical views, peace and tranquility, and freedom. A man can truly be himself when he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, because only when he is alone is he truly free, wrote Schopenhauer. Solitude provides a space where you are not limited by social norms or the needs and desires of others. It is preferable to be out of sight of others than to want to be accompanied while suffering their presence. Spending time alone has a profound place in various religious traditions. Buddha urged people to withdraw from social life and considered solitude a pillar of spiritual enlightenment. Jung and many philosophers also recognize the value of solitude. One of them is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who admitted to enjoying solitude because it allowed him to escape the animosity of humanity while enjoying the smile of nature. The power of detachment in solitude also applies to the nihilistic approach to life. For Nietzsche, spending time alone was not a matter of spiritual development or getting closer to nature. He perceived solitude as a means to separate himself from a crowd contaminated by what he called slave morality, following a system of values that stripped them of power and turned them into docile sheep, resentful of their shepherds. Nietzsche also criticized the shepherd and his master's morality, as they were part of the same system of oppression and submission. Regarding nature, loneliness gave Nietzsche a way to transcend this system, allowing the creation of new individual values beyond the conventional framework. Solitude allows us to know ourselves, embrace our individuality, and reflect on how we want to live our lives authentically and on our own terms. Whether seeking spiritual enlightenment, a deeper connection with nature, escaping traditional values and conventional ideas, or creating fertile ground for individual meaning, loneliness becomes our companion. Social interaction has a price, and sometimes that price is too high. But loneliness also has a price, especially when it is excessive and unwanted. Depending on the individual, being away from people for too long can be harmful. Loneliness and isolation are a growing problem. Some people crave social interaction but struggle to obtain it. It is better to be alone than in bad company, but it is also preferable to be accompanied than to wish not to be there. There is a balance to find, and in my experience, this balance is not static. It depends on who I am, my life situation, and my needs at any given moment. This balance requires daily self-reflection, asking myself, what do I want? What do I need now? We should never deal in absolute positions. Our desire for solitude is constantly changing, just as our desire for social interaction is constantly changing. Continuous self-inquiry helps me balance loneliness and being with people. The more true I am to myself, the healthier my relationship with loneliness and others becomes. Being alone and wanting to be around people is not pleasant. Being around people and wanting to be alone is not pleasant either. Changing the situation requires courage. When it comes to loneliness, it takes courage to admit the situation and dissatisfaction, to leave the comfort zone. When it comes to your desire for solitude, it takes courage to recognize this need and withdraw from social life, even if only for a while, or even to admit that the people around you cause more harm than good, especially in cases of abuse. Sometimes, following the call to solitude might be the best thing to do. The challenge, of course, is if you are willing and able to retreat and carry this out. If you learn to feel comfortable and happy being alone, you are less likely to cling to others. It is better to be alone than in bad company because in solitude, we find the strength we thought we needed. This has numerous parallels with the hero archetype described by Carl Jung. Many heroes, both in mythology and in modern fiction, have experienced moments of loneliness that were crucial to achieving greatness. Heroes such as Perseus, Achilles, Hercules, and Ulysses, as well as more recent figures such as Batman, Frodo, and Neo, go through periods of solitude while discovering the truth about reality and their role as the chosen one. These examples, along with our own experiences, show us that in solitude, we can find a deep knowledge of ourselves. If used wisely, this knowledge can accelerate our fall or reveal our true potential. In the end, the decision about which destination that oasis of solitude will take you is yours alone. To finish, I quote Carl Jung, "In solitude, the unconscious manifests itself with greater clarity." When we are alone, we have the opportunity to listen to the inner voices that often remain silenced in everyday life. Remember to subscribe and hit the like button for more videos and to help us reach more people.